That day, I was mowing her lawn when she suddenly whispered, "Come inside quickly." The words still echo in my mind. They weren't loud. They weren't playful. They carried a weight that made my chest tighten. In that moment, I wasn't just a man behind a mower. I was someone caught in the middle of something I didn't yet understand. Her name is Ellen Harper. She's 52, a neighbor I've known for years in the simplest sense. Waves across the street, polite exchanges about the weather, the kind of person you never expect to step into the center of your story. But that afternoon, with sweat running down my neck and the hum of the mower still in my ears, she turned everything upside down with just 4 words. "My name is David Sullivan. I'm 48, divorced 3 years, father to a son who's already in college and barely calls anymore. Life for me had shrunk to routines. Work, yard chores, the occasional beer with old friends who themselves are too tired to talk about anything beyond bills and back pain. I wasn't looking for surprises, let alone whispers that carried a charge like that. I remember shutting off the mower. The sudden silence felt heavy, broken only by the sound of cicadas. Ellen Harper stood by her porch, one hand resting on the frame of the door. Her hair, dark with strands of silver, moved lightly in the breeze. She wasn't smiling. Her eyes held something urgent, maybe fear, maybe something else I couldn't place. I wiped my forehead with the back of my hand and walked closer, each step feeling like trespass. "What is it?" I asked. She shook her head. "Not here." Then she turned and disappeared inside, leaving the door ajar just enough for me to follow if I dared. I stood there, caught between sense and impulse. Neighbors cut lawns. Neighbors lend sugar. Nod politely at block parties. They don't whisper invitations that make your heart pound like you're 16 again. And yet, I couldn't stop myself. I stepped in. Her living room smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Curtains half drawn let the late sun slant across the carpet. Ellen Harper was at the window, peeking out as though making sure no one had seen me enter. When she turned, the lines on her face looked softer, but her voice carried tension. "I didn't mean to scare you. I needed a moment." I should have asked what she meant. I should have excused myself. Instead, I found myself lowering onto her couch, trying to read the storm behind her palm. She sat across from me, hands folded in her lap, fingers tightening and loosening. "People talk," she said quietly, "about me, about you helping, about things that aren't true." My throat went dry. I had heard Frank, her other neighbor, toss a remark or two about Ellen Harper being lonely. I had brushed it off, but hearing her voice, the fear behind those words, it struck deeper. "I don't care what they say," I answered more firmly than I expected. She looked at me, then really looked. There was something in her gaze that seemed to test me, to weigh whether I meant it. And for a long moment, neither of us moved. The hum of the outside world faded. It was just the two of us sharing a silence more powerful than any confession. Then she smiled barely, almost invisible, and whispered again, though softer this time, "Thank you." I left not long after, returning to the mower, the half-cut lawn, the pretense of normal life. But nothing felt normal anymore. That whisper had cracked open something I didn't know I had been waiting for. And as the sun dipped low, casting gold across the trimmed grass, I realized a door had opened inside me, too. Whether I had the courage to step through it, that was a question for another day. The next morning, I promised myself it had meant nothing. A whisper, a moment, a misunderstanding. I told my hands to focus on the mower and my head to stay where it belonged. But promises crumble fast once a door opens. I kept hearing her voice low, careful, almost fragile. By noon, the sun burned the dew off the grass. I was back on her side of the fence, edging the path the blades missed. Ellen Harper stood on the porch with 2 mugs. Simple blue shirt, jeans, hair tucked behind one ear. When our eyes met, something eased in my chest. "Truce?" she asked, lifting a mug. "I didn't know we were at war," I said, and she smiled. We took our coffee on the steps, a safe distance apart, looking over the yard. We talked about the gate latch, a robin under the eaves, the price of gas. Then Frank's truck slowed at the curb. He leaned out with a grin that never reached his eyes. "Morning, lovebirds," he called. "Neighbors say the grass isn't all you're cutting." Ellen Harper's mug tilted. I stood without thinking. "Keep driving, Frank." He laughed and rolled on. The porch fell quiet. Ellen Harper's shoulders dropped and the breath she let out sounded like it had been trapped for years. "I'm sorry," I said. "For what other people say," she answered. "Don't collect debts that aren't yours." She stared into her cup. "I used to fight every rumor. Took pieces off me. Now I protect my pieces." We sat with that. I wanted to take her hand, but rules stopped me. She broke them first. Her fingers touched my wrist, light as a question. "Thank you for speaking up," she said. "It matters. If you want me to keep my distance, say the word." Her mouth tilted. If I wanted distance, I wouldn't have made coffee. After lunch, I fixed the latch. She held the screws, passing them into my palm like coins for a toll. Our talk slipped deeper. Her job at the library. The winter after her husband's illness. The way empty rooms have their own sound. I told her about the ache after my divorce and my son who answers with emojis and silence. We didn't trade advice. We traded weight. Clouds gathered toward evening. The light softened. Ellen Harper stood stretched and winced. "Old ladder," she said, touching her shoulder. "It doesn't forgive." "Sit," I told her. I set a cushion behind her back. "David Sullivan," she said, "I don't know where this is going. I only know that being alone has been easy and expensive. Cost me everything I didn't risk. I'm not good at grand gestures," I said, "but I can show up. I can fix what's in front of me. I can carry my share of the noise." She looked to the fence and grass. "Noise?" she said, almost smiling. "We might not drown it out." "No," I said, "but we can turn up our voices." Thunder muttered far off. She rose and touched my shoulder. "Tomorrow," she said, "there's a box in the attic I can't lift. Come after work." "Tomorrow," I said. I crossed the yard at dusk. At my porch, I turned. Ellen Harper was still on the steps. A hand around the mug, the other raised in a small wave I felt in my bones. The first drops hit. I wanted the storm to hurry. Inside, I set my phone on the table. A message arrived. "Thank you not just for today for not running." I typed, deleted, typed again. "I'll be here outside." The wind moved through the maples. The house settled. I lay awake and listened, counting the seconds between lightning and thunder, measuring the distance to something that was finally, steadily moving toward us. Sleep never came easy that night. Ever. It was Saturday morning when I saw her daughter for the first time. I had just finished fixing a loose board on Ellen Harper's porch when a silver car pulled up. A young woman stepped out, mid-20s, long hair tied in a loose knot, carrying herself with the same confidence I often saw in Ellen Harper. She looked at me the way people sometimes do when they don't know if you're a stranger or a problem. "Mom," she called, and Ellen Harper appeared in the doorway, smiling brighter than I had seen all week. "Rachel," she said, her voice trembling with pride. I stepped back, wiping my hands on my jeans. Rachel's eyes flicked to me, then to the tools scattered on the porch. "And you are David Sullivan?" I answered quickly, just helping with a few repairs. Her tone was polite but sharp when she replied, "I see." She hugged her mother, but her eyes stayed on me, assessing, guarded. Later that afternoon, when I returned with the mower, Rachel was sitting by the window. She didn't wave. She just watched, arms crossed. Every pass I made across the lawn, I could feel her eyes. It reminded me of high school when the principal stood behind you during detention, waiting for you to slip. I thought about leaving early, but Ellen Harper stepped outside with 2 glasses of iced tea. She handed me one and whispered, "Ignore her. She doesn't know you yet." Her hand brushed mine as I took the glass. A small touch ordinary to anyone else, but to me it felt like a line crossed. I looked at her and she looked back, soft, steady, as if to say, "Don't let go yet." That evening, her friend Beth came by. She was sharpied with a way of speaking that cut through silence. "Ellen Harper, people are talking," she said, glancing at me while stirring sugar into her coffee. "You should be careful." I don't need protecting, Ellen Harper answered, her voice calm but firm. Beth's eyes narrowed. I just don't want you hurt again. Then softer to me. She's been through enough. I wanted to defend myself to prove I wasn't another mistake waiting to happen. But all I managed was a quiet I know. Later, when Beth left and Rachel had gone upstairs, Ellen Harper and I stayed in the kitchen. The hum of the refrigerator filled the pauses. She stared into her cup, fingers tracing the rim. Sometimes I wonder if people ever see me for who I am now, she said. Not the widow, not the gossip, not the mother, just me. I didn't answer right away. Words felt heavy in my throat. Finally, I reached across the table, resting my hand over hers. She froze for a moment, then let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for years. I see you, I said quietly. Her eyes lifted, glistening in the soft light. It wasn't a declaration. Not yet. But it was enough to change the air between us. She didn't pull her hand away. From upstairs, Rachel's footsteps creaked. Ellen Harper gently slipped her hand from mine, a silent signal that the moment was over. But the warmth lingered in my palm and in my chest. As I walked home under the fading light, I knew something had shifted. The lawn, the whispers, the doubts. They no longer felt like chores or obstacles. They felt like the cost of standing at the edge of something real. And for the first time in years, I was willing to pay it. Rain had been falling since morning. Soft at first, then steady, turning the quiet street into a blur of gray. I was repairing a fence post on my own porch when Frank walked by, umbrella tilted low. He stopped, looked at me with a smirk, and said just loud enough to carry. You think helping a widow makes you her man? People see what's going on, David Sullivan. I clenched my jaw but said nothing. His words lingered like smoke, creeping under the skin. By the time I finished and went inside, I could already imagine the whispers spreading across backyards and kitchen tables. That afternoon, Ellen Harper called. Her voice was thin, almost hesitant. Could you come over just for a moment? When I stepped into her house, the air smelled of rain and lavender. She stood near the window, arms wrapped around herself. Frank said something to me today, she began. He implied you were using me, that you wanted people to think we were. She stopped, shaking her head. I felt a heat rise in me, sharper than before. That's not who I am, Ellen Harper. You know that. Her eyes were troubled, searching. I want to believe you, but sometimes I don't know what to believe anymore. After what I went through with my husband's illness and the years after, trust doesn't come easy. The silence between us grew heavy, broken only by the drum of rain on the glass. I stepped closer. Then let me prove it. Not with words, just by being here. By not walking away when it gets hard. She looked at me, her lips parting as if to speak, then closed again. For a long moment we stood like that, two people tangled between doubt and desire. Suddenly, footsteps creaked behind us. Rachel had come down the stairs. She froze, eyes darting from her mother to me, suspicion written all over her face. Without a word, she turned and left the room. Ellen Harper sighed, pressing her forehead to the window pane. This is what I mean. Everything is complicated. I wanted to argue to tell her that complications were worth facing, but the words stuck. Instead, I found myself whispering, I'll take the storm if it means standing here with you. Her head turned slowly, eyes locking with mine. Something softened in her face. She stepped closer until her forehead touched mine. A quiet, fragile connection in the dim light. Her hand grazed mine, a fleeting touch that felt more intimate than any embrace. Then she pulled back, her voice barely audible. Be careful, David Sullivan. The more we let them see, the more they'll try to tear us apart. I left her house as the rain poured harder, soaking me to the bone. Walking home, I should have felt defeated, but instead there was a strange calm in my chest, because even through the storm, I had felt her choose closeness, if only for a heartbeat, and a heartbeat was enough to keep me going. The rain had cleared by Sunday, leaving the air sharp with the scent of wet earth. I went outside to trim the hedges, hoping the rhythm of work might quiet my thoughts. But when I looked up, Frank was standing at the edge of Ellen Harper's yard, arms crossed, his stare fixed like a blade. "You're making a fool of yourself," he called across the fence. "Everyone knows she's too broken for this. And you're just lonely enough to pretend." The words cut deep. But before I could answer, Ellen Harper stepped out of her house. She was dressed simply, hair loose, but her presence carried a weight that made Frank falter. "That's enough," she said firmly. "What I choose to do with my life isn't yours to decide." Frank's mouth twisted, but he said no more. With a grunt, he turned and walked away, muttering under his breath. The silence he left behind was heavy, but also freeing. Ellen Harper crossed the yard slowly, stopping a few feet from me. "He doesn't speak for everyone," she said, "but he speaks for enough people to make me doubt myself." I put the clippers down, my hands shaking slightly. "Then let me ask you something. Not about them, about us." Her eyes narrowed, cautious, waiting. "Do you want this? Not the whispers, not the pity, not the gossip. Just this. Me and you, however imperfect it looks." For a long time she didn't answer. I could hear a bird in the distance, the faint hum of a car passing down the street. Finally, she stepped closer, her hand brushing against mine. "I do," she whispered. "I've wanted something real for so long, but fear kept me silent. You reminded me I'm still alive enough to want." The simplicity of her words shook me. I reached for her hand, holding it openly without shame, even as I imagined the curtains twitching on the street. For once, I didn't care. Rachel appeared in the doorway, arms folded. Her expression was unreadable, but she didn't turn away this time. She just watched us, her mother's hand in mine. Ellen Harper called softly, "Rachel, come here." Reluctantly, her daughter stepped outside. "I don't want you hurt again," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and defiance. Ellen Harper squeezed her hand. "I know, but hurt comes from hiding, too. And I won't hide anymore." Rachel looked at me, then really looked as if weighing whether I was strong enough to stand in the storm with them. Finally, she gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. That evening, Ellen Harper and I sat on her porch together, side by side, watching the last light fade behind the trees. The lawn was freshly cut, the fence newly repaired. Ordinary things that suddenly felt like markers of change. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you realize," she said softly, "how much of life is lost waiting for the right time?" I smiled, wrapping an arm around her. "Then let's stop waiting." The world beyond us would not change overnight. There would be whispers, looks, maybe even more confrontations. But in that moment, the weight of other people's judgment no longer mattered because Ellen Harper had chosen to stand with me and I with her. And that choice felt like the beginning of something stronger than fear, louder than gossip, brighter than any storm we had weathered.